Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to, depending on wherever you may live or however you choose to read your clock, this early morning, middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. The merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter and are appreciated. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload, shall we? I'm 53 years old. When I was 18, I joined the Marine Reserve straight out of high school, combat engineer and bulk fuel specialist. Deployed first Gulf War, and now a disabled veteran. My dad was a two-tour Vietnam Army with the 101st Airborne Rangers, 20-year veteran. I grew up fishing very young. My dad and I used to go hard to get to these fishing spots. I was about 7 years old in Yakima, Washington. My dad was stationed there for a few years. When we had gone fishing at our favorite spot, my dad had gone around the lake and I stayed near the car. Saw some fish splashing further up and decided to try my luck. Big fish broke my line, and I was getting ready to retie a new hook when suddenly the hair stood up on the back of my neck. The forest was dead quiet. I looked around and saw nothing. I quickly grabbed my gear and poles and ran back to the car. My dad came out of the woods, saying how a big-ass bass had gotten away, and asked why I was by the car and not fishing. And I said, I don't know, I got bored. My dad looked at me and looked around. He joked that hell must have froze over for me to say that. On the way home, he asked, why'd you really stop fishing? I said I got scared all of a sudden, and I don't know why. We left it at that, but I never strayed far from the car at that lake, ever. Fast forward, we are living in Sierra Vista, Arizona, near Fort Hachua Army Base. We lived out in the boonies, and the mountain range was nearby. I was 17 years old when this incident happened. My family had gone to Tucson for the day. I stayed home to feed the horses, cows, dogs, chickens. I loved taking care of our extended family. It was monsoon season, and it was raining hard. Later on that night, I heard my dogs barking outside. We never let our dogs into the house, and they always knew better than to come in. I opened the back door and shout, "Stop it!" when my two dogs almost knocked me over in their haste to get inside. They ran to the kitchen and did not budge. I tried hauling them out by their collars, but they kept fighting me. All I could think was maybe the coyotes are outside. I went and got my dad's rifle out. I couldn't remember where my dad kept the ammo. He had a 30-06, 22, 30-30. I had shot all three and had been trained on safety. I was a captain of our JROTC rifle team sharpshooter badge. Find a 30-30 round and slide it in. I figure if it were coyote, I'd be able to scare them off with a gunshot in the air or near them. As I walked around looking for the ammo earlier, I had turned the outside lights on. I saw our cow and 2 horses looking at the light by our front door. The rain had stopped, but I noticed that our animals were looking past our front door as if sensing something near the opposite side by the back door. I shrugged it off, thinking coyote. I went to the back door with the rifle in hand, lights on, and opened the door. Lightning flashed, and I saw 2 red eyes looking back at me. We had a nearby gravel pile that we used to regate our driveway. It was about 6 feet tall. The reason I state this was because those eyes were staring back at me and looking down at me. Coyote on the gravel hill, bird, but out during a rainy monsoon. I raised the rifle and sight in on the eyes, but lightning flashed. It was then that I saw the gravel pile illuminated off to the right, and nothing was there. To the left of the eyes, the closest mesquite tree lit up, but no eyes were there. I realized the eyes belonged to something big staring at me, well over 9 feet tall. Only 1 bullet chambered and no more ammo because, well, I hadn't found any. I lowered the weapon and closed the door, ran back inside. Grabbed the other 2 rifles, instantly remembered where the ammo was. Loaded every rifle and chambered them. I put all the rifles in the kitchen with the dogs and stayed there until my family came back. I never got chewed out so bad by my dad. Why do you have all my rifles out, and why are they loaded and chambered? What the hell do you think you're doing? You are grounded. I'm hiding the rifles and ammo. I told my dad what happened, but he never believed me. I still think of that night, and I shudder. Fast forward to recently, living in Alabama, just outside of Montgomery. I was bass fishing with my friend Mike below Lay Dam. We hadn't been fishing for more than an hour or so when this incident happened. My friend Mike is an avid fisherman/hunter. He's hunted deer, hog, turkey, etc. He grew up doing this. We're fishing and having a great time. Suddenly, we hear this ungodly roar. To say it was loud is an understatement. If you think a dam warning horn to signal the dam slough's opening is loud, then you haven't heard WTF made this roar. I looked at Mike as he was the closest to the direction of the roar. I was at the back of the boat, and my head whipped sideways when I heard this. Mike stood up and looked in the direction of it. I asked Mike, "Have you ever heard anything like that in Alabama?" Mike looked at me and said, "I don't know what the hell that was, but I know it was a ways off." I said, 5 or so miles. 5 miles or so, he said, "Sounds about right." We looked in the direction of it and went back fishing. We joked about it, but Mike doesn't like me telling other people about when he's around. That's all I got. I'm glad I got that off my chest. No idea if anyone else will read it or believe it. Don't really care, but I do know what happened, and that there are things out there that no 30-30, even fully loaded, will take down, let alone a bolt-action 30-06 or 22 semi-automatic, LOL. I wonder if I should ask Mike to go fishing above Lay Dam and see if we can get near to the spot where that sound came from. Probably not. Don't know if I want to see what it was, because I'll never be the same after that. Semper Fi. A second encounter, Hartford County, Maryland, 10/21, midday. On Monday, October 18th, 2021, midday, I took my 7 and 2.5-year-old sons to the state park, about 1.5 miles up the road from our house. Rocks State Park / Hidden Valley area. The park is small, 4 parking spots and a 1/2-mile trail that follows a creek. The trail ends at a fork in the creek with a beachhead about 20 feet long. 6 people would be a crowd. Both of my sons are familiar with this park, as it is in rotation with the 3 parks we choose to go to for our little hike once a week. The trail is moderate with some inclines, natural obstacles, and occasional narrowing due to lack of maintenance. My eldest son is comfortable being 30 to 50 feet ahead of me while I pace with my youngest. Nothing is out of the ordinary, just like a normal hike. My eldest reaches the beachhead 15 to 20 seconds before we do. We approach the creek beach, and my youngest is on my left, starting to mess with rocks and throwing them at the creek. My oldest is 10 to 15 feet to my right, messing around, throwing rocks in the water as well. I bend down to cuff my pant leg, and I hear a blood-curdling scream from my oldest. I look up at him, and he is screaming, falling backwards, feverishly kicking his legs. I follow his line of sight across the creek. Perched on a large, flat rock is an animal that I cannot and still do not understand. It was no more than 20 to 25 feet away. Its dimensions seemed so large it looked as if it could leap the creek in one stride. A barrel chest with clearly defined pectoral muscles, shoulders, and biceps, no different than a man, just a lot larger. Bulging eyes and a stubby snout like a hyena. It looked as if it was a sprinter starting position. Not an animal on all fours. Its thighs and hind end were noticeably large. The mass of this animal was unnatural. The ears faced forward with hair tufts on the side and tops of them. The face looked as if it was on high alert, similar to when your dog has quick head movements because you are getting ready to throw the ball. It kept switching between my son screaming and falling backwards into the trail, running away, and me screaming, picking up my other son. As I am frantically trying to get between it and my first son, it almost looks as if it was in the lunging position that were backing up. My perspective was head on before turning onto the trail. I get him, and we are out of direct sight. I yell to son 1, run. The weirdest thing would happen. My 7-year-old would start sprinting and crying, and after 30 feet, he would turn around, almost in a complete daze, not understanding what happened. Then I would have to yell at him to run again. He would run, cry, stop, dazed. This happened 3 times, and I still don't understand how shock or fear could do that. This creature did not follow us down the trail, thank God. The thoughts going through my head, I wouldn't wish on my enemies. It was the only time in my life where I knew I could not protect my children. The buck knife on my hip was no better than a pillow. The moment I told my 7-year-old son that he might have to take his younger brother's hand and get back to the car as fast as possible has left a scar deeper in my mind than this unexplainable creature. I apologize for the crap story structure and horrible grammar, even though there was no mistaking what I witnessed. It doesn't matter. Trying to explain this to anyone is pointless. I like to think I am considerably self-aware. I cannot understand why my mind is forcing itself to debunk what I saw. I was undoubtedly afraid, but my focus was crystal clear. My kids safe at all cost. I was laser focused on my surroundings and what was in it. None of my emotions distorted my vision or made me misinterpret my surroundings. Today's third encounter. During my time in college, I had a friend whose dad owned an 800-acre piece of land in eastern Texas. In the past, he had leased it out to hunters and paper companies, but was no longer doing that. He had built a cabin on the land a few years before and would let us go out there from time to time and mess around. It served as a great way to relax from the pressures of school and to get closer to nature. Spring break of '97, we loaded up our trucks and headed for the cabin. Our plans were to shoot guns, drink beer, and other things rednecks like us do in the woods. Our first morning kept us busy cleaning the cabin and moving all of our stuff inside. Around dinner time, we made a large fire outside and cooked a bunch of steaks and fried potatoes. We skipped dessert and broke open some beer. The sun went down not long after, and for the remainder of that evening, we got loaded and passed around a joint or two. At some time in that night, I heard some shuffling noise outside and went out to check on it. The fire was barely burning at that point, and just outside of its light, I swore I could see the shape of a man standing completely still. From what I could tell, it or he was facing me, perhaps waiting to see what I'd do. I blinked my eyes really hard to get a clearer look, but my position and lack of light made it too hard to see clearly. The shape continued to stand still, so I decided I'd walk a little closer in hopes of getting a better view. The thought terrified me, but I was transfixed on this being. Or perhaps I was still too intoxicated to make any wise decisions. I took 2 steps forward, but was distracted by a voice behind me. My friend had woke up and noticed the door was wide open. So he had gotten out of bed and saw me walking around the fire. His voice caused me to jump a little, but I soon realized who it was speaking. I asked him if he had seen the figure on the other side of the fire pit. He just laughed at me and said I must be stoned and seeing things. We laughed it off and returned to bed. On my way, I turned back to take one more look, but the shape was no longer there. I chuckled to myself and finally went to sleep. The next morning, I wrote the whole experience off as the result of way too much fun and went on with the day. We spent the first half fishing in a big pond. Post-lunch was shooting guns and one guy's compound bow that he had just bought. The beers and smoke broke out after dinner. A game of poker was attempted, but soon canceled in favor of another evening, telling lies around the fire. On one of our many trips to relieve myself that night, I was spooked by a sound of a stick breaking close by, and I got back to that fire. The look of fear was on my face, made the other guys laugh their butts off. I tried to explain what happened, but was quickly reminded that we were not the only creatures in the woods. The reasoning seemed sound, so I accepted it. Not long after, we are standing around, involved in some deep discussion, and I turned to speak to the guy to my left. What I saw caused me to clench up so tight I could have snapped a steel rod with my sphincter. Standing within a few feet behind my friend was another, creature, man I did not recognize. It was like it appeared out of nowhere. What made it creepier was that it was staring intently at the back of his head, almost like it was boring a hole through his head with his eyes. I remained frozen stiff. The longer I looked at him, I realized he was the same creature I saw lingering outside the light of the fire the night before. It was average height with long unkept hair and beard. My friend continued rambling about whatever, unaware of his shadow. After several long seconds, this creature turned to me with a blank expression and walked away. This is when I began pointing and rambling about what I had just witnessed. He and my other friends laughed at me again. There was no way I was seeing things this time. I described it to them, and one of them suggested that it was a Bigfoot. Despite my protest, no one was buying it, and I eventually cut my losses and shut up. However, I was not beat. Their mockery had made me even more determined to prove its existence. The next 2 days were quiet. no stranger in the woods. In other words, but I kept my eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary. By our fifth morning, I was beginning to question my own sanity. I had seen this mysterious being stalking around twice now, and it had suddenly disappeared. I resolved to put my quest on the back burner until some new evidence arose. My friend's dad had mentioned to him an owner of one of the surrounding properties had spotted a small group of wild hog running through their land. So we grabbed our rifles and went on a search for them. A mile or so down on the property of many roads, we came across some hog wallows and knew we were on the scent. We went up the road. Now, foot tracking them, another mile, we stumbled upon 3 large hogs rooting up the ground, preparing to make bacon. 2 of us chambered around as quiet as possible with our rifles and took aim. I was less than a second from saying 3 and pulled the trigger when the loud crack of another rifle and the air followed closely by a burst of wooden bark above my head. It took a moment for it to register that we had beginning to shot at it. A few seconds later, another crack and strike, this time even closer to my friend. We were not going to wait for a third. My friend, who appeared to be this thing's target, led us down the trail to the cabin. No more shots followed as we fled. However, instead of finding safety at the camp, the shots began again. Seeing no other opinion, we hopped into the truck and hauled ass out of there. This was the time just before cell phones, so we had to drive 20 miles to get to town. After we had explained the situation, we returned to the property a few hours later with some deputies. We approached slowly and remained in the car when we parked. We waited to see if the shots would start again, but nothing happened. A cursor look around counted 3 holes in the cabin and another 2 in my buddy's windshield. Perhaps the worst part was all of our camping stuff, sleeping bags, and such, were spread out all over the ground. Luckily, we'd smoked all the weed that night before. Nothing was missing but the box of 30-30 ammo. Strangely, my sleeping bag and wool blanket. A theory began to form in the deputies' minds that we had stumbled upon a squatter or a poacher camping out on the property, and for whatever reason, they acted as if they were going to let it go. But once my friend's dad, who owned the land, heard about it, he put pressure on them to start a search. This was about the time I repeated my experience of seeing someone or something lurking near the cabin. No one was laughing now, and my experience was finally being taken seriously by someone. The search was led around the property by my friend's dad. School had already begun again. By the time it took place, it continued for a full week, but nothing other than old caps. We found it was assumed that he knew the heat would be on him after the shooting incident, and he moved on, or it moved on. During the course of investigation, several avenues were followed to ID this creature or stranger, like escaped cons, but it remains unidentified to this day because of the chance of another attack. Our trips to the property ended. The next year, we tried to camp out somewhere else, but it was not the same, and our nature getaway died out. Within 5 years, my friend's dad had a heart attack and lost interest in the cabin. The paper company lease was renewed, and the land's trees had been used to make paper and pulp wood products ever since. Each time I jot down a quick note, I'm reminded of our awesome trips, and especially the odd and terrifying week that caused them to stop. I do once or twice a year talk to my old college buddy on the phone. As far as he's heard, the crazy stranger or thing still has not been caught. We sometimes theorize as to its origins. I, however, often take this much further when I'm alone. I wonder why so-called strangers seem to focus most of his anger onto my friend, and perhaps far more concerning, is he still out there waiting for this chance to finish what he began all those years ago. Today's fourth encounter. At the time of my experience, it was 2 months after Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. I was living with my uncle and aunt in their farm. The farm is located at the top of a mountain that forms part of the El Yuqui. El Yuqui is a mountain range that is a national reserve, and there is rumors that the government uses it as a lab. Think of it like Area 51 of Puerto Rico. My uncle has told me several times to be careful when I go outside at night because I can get lost or a group of wild dog could attack me. Usually I don't go outside at night because I don't have any reason to do so. One night I was with my cousin Miguel. No, I am 17, he is 23, joking around, and we suddenly hear this loud screech. The kind of scream that an animal in horrible pain would do. I asked Miguel if he knew what the hell that might have been, and he did not respond. I asked him again, and he didn't answer. He only told me to get my crossbow and meet him at the front of the house. We went to check on the cows first. All the cows seemed okay, but they were all grouped on the corner, which seemed weird, but we forgot about that and went and checked on the pigs. Every pig was organized in their cage of 15 square feet, in which we had checked one by one. All the pigs looked scared. We then reached the last cage, in which Colonel was supposed to be my uncle's fattest pig, but the cage was empty, which was weird because we checked on him before going home. We started looking if there was some remains or something, but we found nothing except some blood on the mud. Then we heard another screech that sounded that it had come from really close by. We ran out and started looking for a huge-ass pig, but we didn't see anything and decided to split up and cover more ground. I went down the trail that was a lot of trees on each side. I started hearing heavy footsteps like 20 feet from where I was standing. I decided to keep walking. When I reached that place that the heavy footsteps came from, I saw some glowing red dots. I flashed my flashlight at it, and that's when I saw it. The ugliest thing I had ever seen, a black, humanoid canine mix that looked grotesque. It didn't have hair. It just had this rugged skin. Its face looked like one of them bats that you'd see with giant teeth that looked too big for its face. That's when I knew that I may have encountered a chupacabra or a werewolf. Luckily, it didn't notice me. It was distracted with something. I noticed that it was eating a live Colonel. At that moment, I silently backed off and hid behind a fallen tree. I had to witness how he ate Colonel. I was in tears. I then decided to kill this effer with my crossbow. I aimed it at it and took the shot. I hit him in his rib area. This creature started shrieking and ran down the mountain. I then called for Miguel and told him to come here. Since we needed to bring back Colonel, or at least try. We decided we would do it the next day. Miguel asked me what was all of the screaming, and I told him that it was the pig suffering, because I, knowing my cousin would try to go after that creature and kill it himself, or get killed himself. We started going back home to catch up on some sleep, but I couldn't sleep that night. I just kept seeing that thing in my mind eating Colonel alive. That morning I went back with Miguel to retrieve the body of Colonel. The body was intact, except that it didn't have any more blood, and it seemed to have huge gashes on its side. Miguel started laughing, and I was like, "What are you laughing for?" When he told me he thought maybe a chupacabra had gotten Colonel. but he was so skeptical, he forgot. When I told him what I saw and shot it in the ribs, Miguel said that my uncle once shot a creature like this in the face with his shotgun and left it for dead. After that night, I am not going to step foot into the forest of Puerto Rico's mountain range without a weapon ever again. Tonight's final encounter. My boyfriend, now husband, and I decided to go on a road trip to my dad's hunting cabin in northern West Virginia, just a few counties over from Point Pleasant. We packed all our gear into our truck the night before so we could get an early start the next morning. We rise and shine extra early because we couldn't contain our excitement. Our trip to the cabin goes fine. We reach the town that the cabin is near and load up on groceries. About an hour later, we're turning down the dirt road towards our cabin. The cabin is a couple miles back in the boondocks away from any kind of civilization. It's very isolated and a creepy place at times. We drive down the dirt road for what seems like forever and finally see the cabin. Both of us are tired from the trip and plan on relaxing by the fireplace and watching some DVDs as soon as the bags of groceries and such are unpacked. We get everything inside. I start dinner while my boyfriend plans on gathering some firewood out back. By 7-something, the sun is starting to set, and we make sure all the doors and windows are locked. It's a small one-bedroom cabin, so there are maybe 5 windows and 2 doors. This will be important later. After we clean up, we decide to watch a movie, so nothing scary. I reach for a cigarette, only to find my pack empty. I ask my boyfriend where the carton was that we had just got, and he tells me it's in the truck. Asks me if he wants me to go get it. I tell him no, that I'll just slip on my shoes and make my way out. Now, I have always been scared of the dark and hate going outside in the dark for as long as I can remember. I turn back to my boyfriend and ask him if he'll stand at the door while I go to the truck. He says yeah and makes his way over. I ease outside and down the steps to the truck. I was reaching in to get the carton of cigarettes when I hear this sound. At first, it sounded like a woman screaming, then it changed to a howling, and it was like those sounds came together to make one creepy sound. Honestly, it's hard to explain. It sounded like a demon and a werewolf all in one. I made a beeline for the cabin, and I see my boyfriend's face fully drained of color. I push him inside and ask him what the hell was that. It took him a while to answer me, and he said, I don't know. I've been in the woods hunting and fishing with my dad and brothers most of my life, and I've never heard anything like that before. Then we hear it again, only it's near the living room window. My boyfriend makes a mad dash to the bedroom to get his pistol, and I get my dad's hunting rifle from the closet. I had never been so scared in my life. I thought, what if this thing tries to get in? Then we hear it again around the front door area. I take aim at the door. My tiny hands are shaking. Oh my God, please help us, I say out loud. I'm maybe 5'4", but I'm going to unleash hell if this thing tries to step foot inside. Then it screamed again, only it wasn't at the door area anymore. It was by the kitchen window. My boyfriend and I stand back with our guns at the ready. Then we heard this crunching sound like metal being destroyed. We were way too scared to move. Finally, after an hour of standing like that and not hearing anything else, we eased over to the kitchen window to look and see if we could spot anything. My boyfriend, being taller than I, looked first and said, Oh my God, it ripped a hole in our truck. I looked out the window and I see what looks like a hole in the door. We then double-checked every window and door to make sure it was locked. Morning came and we decided to inspect the truck. My boyfriend went out first with his pistol in hand. We got to the truck and there were claw marks from the tail light to the passenger door, with what looked like a huge punch mark in it. We go back inside and call the forest ranger. He comes out a couple hours later, looks at the truck, and tells us that in the last 6 months, people have been seeing strange things, and a farm that is close by has had some animals disappear and gutted. He also told us to be wise to clear out until they find the animal responsible for this. He looked scared and pale himself. He said he didn't want to be up here for a long period of time, but he would wait for us to pack our stuff and follow us to the main road. We didn't need to be told twice. We tossed all our stuff into the truck and flew down that dirt road. When we made it to the main road, we thanked him and went on our way. To my knowledge, they have never found any creature, thing, person, nothing that was doing those things in the woods, and we have never been back there since. We didn't see whatever it was, and I'm glad we didn't, but I do know that no animal was making those sounds and could do that kind of damage to a truck. Not even maybe a bear.
And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed this early morning, middle of the night bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. It is your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.